Hola, Flamingos. Welcome to the mid-May update. This is the one where I talk a bit about my work and everything that's been going on in my world. I think I'm gonna title this one Part 1 of The Legend of the Silver Codpiece, which is my next release, which I'm super, super excited about. It's the second book in the Bawdy Bard saga, which is going to be, I suspect at this time, it's going to be pretty lengthy. It's difficult it's such a weird thing writing, and I've had reason to consider it this week because I went back. So I finished that, and that's launching on June the 15th. And in this newsletter, if the artwork is ready, you're gonna get. I suspect it's going to be ready, but you probably get a look at that. And if not, then it will be in one of the following newsletters. But and this is my newsletter at andrewmarkrowe.com. But after I finished this one, I started work almost immediately on the book 3, which is going to be called Quest for Vagilon: Penetrating the Schlongomance. And when I first started writing the Bawdy Bard series, it was intended to be just a like a one-off. I was going to do it. So I'd read this book called Newsletter Ninja, and it's basically about for authors, how you build your mailing list up and all this kind of stuff, and like lots of tips. And it was written by Tammy Lambrecht, I think, who's an author who has a bit of a following. And anyway, so she was kind of sharing her wisdom. And so I decided I was going to do that, make something unique for members of the mailing list. But as I was writing it, it was released the end of 2021. I think it was December. I can't remember exactly what date, but it was in December 2021. And I was going through some stuff, personal stuff. I mean, the pandemic generally has been a very tumultuous time for me. I just, March of 2019, I separated from my ex-wife, separated, and we eventually divorced. And then I got together with somebody again at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was a lot of tumult in my life around that. And during the pandemic, I had a bit of a breakdown, which I hadn't had for in my 20s. I had like serious issues with mental health, and that kind of had mostly resolved. I went to Peru and participated in some ayahuasca ceremonies. You probably already know this if you follow me at all, because I'd have no problem talking about it. But that really saved my life, changed the course of my life, because there was a point where I was like suicidally depressed in my 20s. Like it was bad. And I didn't get that bad again during the pandemic, but there were some low points. And I was working out a lot of stuff. And I mean, one of the things about ayahuasca is that they call it the vine of the soul. It tends to have a bit of a spiritual effect, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. It's hard to talk. I've talked about it a fair bit in my writing, in various different metaphors and ways of speaking. And one of the things I kind of, recognized, I was interviewed by Matt LeDrew a couple of weeks ago. Matt LeDrew is another author here in Newfoundland. He's in St. John's or the St. John's area. I'm not sure exactly where, but he also he has a publishing company, and he's been at it since like 2007. He's been, one of the OGs, and he's got his publishing company is called Engine Books. They make a lot of great stuff. I'm really, he's a great influence in the community, and he does this podcast. And he asked me, he said, because the first book was called The Yoga of Strength, and he said it's like a belief, like there's something about belief systems in there. And like I talk about God a fair bit in my writing, notions of God, spirituality, all this stuff, and it's like the characters talk about it quite explicitly. And like what, like the thing about this stuff is that it's still fiction. Like it's like a bit of a nuance that I don't even know. Like you can't like they talk about like one of the things about like God or that, like one of the definitions that I think is probably the best definition that I've run across was by Joseph Campbell, who said it was that which is beyond words. You can't really talk about it. Like there's no way of putting it into words. Like artists kind of get at it through metaphor, and there's kind of like a bit of that. And like a lot of my writing, my first book, I mean, the Yoga Strength, that was like extremely spiritual, because I had basically a I don't know how you would describe it, but the thing that spurred me on to write that thing was extremely like my ex-wife told me that I was spiritually manic. Like it was like kind of like insane. Like there was no question that it was insane. And it's really weird for me to kind of like, because I reflect on that, because growing up I was a big atheist, like and I don't even know what I am now if I had to label myself, but it wouldn't be somebody who's like a theist, I don't think, because there's something, it's not even, I don't know if it's agnostic, like I don't even know if that label fits it, and it's difficult to talk about these, and it's like, I'm writing in fantasy, which is a genre that it seems to me that lots of people who are involved in, and not everybody, I mean, it's like normal, it's like any swatch or slice of life, like people are different, people are different, people are like, there's all kinds of different people involved in it, but it seems to me like it's a fairly rationalistic crowd, which is funny because fantasy is this thing which, it's magic. Like I kind of look back, maybe it was like, because I was always big into it, and like maybe it was like the replacement I had for any kind of spiritual ideas, because I mean, like magic and all this stuff, like it's kind of getting into the realm of spirit to some degree, and the hero's journey and all this kind of stuff, it does have a spiritual element to it, which I didn't really appreciate when I was in my early 20s and that was reading The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell and all this kind of stuff. But the I mean, the long and short of that whole process for me, like, the I got a little bit drunk on the whole thing, and like the first, like I was rereading The Cutlass Swoon to do the second book now, because after I finished the third book in the Bawdy Bard series, I started to write the fourth one. But it just, the thing about that, like, art is like, there's a certain amount of, or at least this is my experience, there's a certain amount of putting your butt in the chair and you write, but at the same time, if it's not ready to come out, you can't force it. Like that's kind of like the thing. Like I stopped writing the second book of The Cutlass Swoon, called City of Gold, back in June of last year. And it was because it just like it just felt like wrong. I don't know. It's all pure feeling. Like there's like, your mind gets part of it. Like your rational mind gets to have a piece of it, because like you got to like force yourself to get up and sit in your chair and do all that stuff. But the actual flow of what's coming out is kind of like beyond my control, or what I feel like is, but that's kind of getting into a little bit of depths that's probably not appropriate for this. If you want to know more of that, you probably read the books. But the basic point that I think I've but what has happened over the course of the pandemic is that I came into this thing with like a very strong sense of spirituality. It was in September of 2019 that so after this happened, I went down to Costa Rica, which was like, I did like another retreat with ayahuasca, and then it was after my breakup from my wife, and it was kind of like I was like looking for a little bit of direction, and so anyways, I did that, and I came back, and I had this renewed sense of spirituality, I suppose is one way of putting it. So I was like very drawn to that, and like I kind of like immersed myself in that, and I was like kind of going that direction with my business. Like I was going to be, I in the spring of the following year, I bought like stuff to become a cacao shaman. Like it was like, like this stuff is kind of like, and I'm looking back at it now and like, I don't want to use the word cringe, but it's kind of like, I definitely had some personal work to do. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, any of this stuff. Like it just wasn't, it just wasn't me. Like it was like I was trying to push something and, force something into being. And I was so I had these like experiences with my mental health and ended up like going into therapy and doing a lot of work on that. And there was and then there was that other relationship broke down, and that was like kind of like right before this was published in November of last year. And it was like, like this book was kind of like a more moderate take on some of this stuff that I've been talking about. Because like I was rereading The Cutlass Spoon because I'm writing this second book, and it was like, it was so preachy and so almost over the top. And, the character kind of like talks about the fact that, none of this is meant to be taken literally. But like the Bawdy Bard, like the whole thing is just a joke. Like, I mean, the self-seriousnness of some of the earlier work, and it wasn't all like that. I mean, the Druid trilogy was like, it was totally fucking bananas, like totally bananas, like chaotic, like I don't know, like I was just like getting that out of my system or something, because it was just like absolutely insane. And so it was like so over the top, and then which it was fun, it's own thing. But The Cutlass Spoon was meant to be like this romance and like very romantic, and the Bawdy Bard was has romantic elements in it. The main growth of the character is something to do with romance, I would say. But so the Bawdy Bard, like the series itself, is a picaresque, which for the picaresque format is kind of like something that came out of, I think it was Spain originally. And the whole idea is like, it's a funny, realistic, like it's like a picaro is a rogue, and like a rogue would be somebody who's like kind of like on the edges of society, not like doing strictly like terrible stuff, like not like, like not so morally corrupt as to be like without any kind of, it's like somebody skirting the edge of things, but like, there's like, it's not super, like the stakes aren't these like crazy save the world type of things. Like it's more like it's more like, I don't know how to, it's lower stakes, and it's more like the plot kind of just falls together. Like there's no real, it's not traditional. I put it that way, but although it is kind of has its own tradition. I mean, when I was growing up, I read a lot of Irvin Welsh, who arguably, a lot of his work could arguably be called picaresque. I mean, Trainspotting was that to a degree, like there's a bit of character growth and all that kind of stuff, but it's, the last score that he kind of makes off with, like that doesn't really, it comes out of nowhere, right? Like it's kind of like it's not like something that's like everything's building up until the end of it, right? Like, and then he steals the drugs from his friends and goes off to Amsterdam or whatever. Or steals the money after the drug deal. It's that book is like very much follows, or seems to me that follows picaresque style. And like I said, Irvin Welsh, like when I was growing up, I was like, I wish I could write like this guy. Like if there was anybody that I would say that I wish I could have written like, it would have been Irvin Welsh. And his stuff is like kind of, it's, I don't know, it's pushing all the envelopes, pushing all the boundaries. It goes way beyond what's like I just kind of like, and that's kind of part of the perverse joy that I get out of comedy, and which is probably why I'm writing such filthy stuff, is like the shock element is definitely part of it. And I was having I had COVID a couple of weeks ago, which is sucked really bad. I was like on the couch for 5 days, and I actually still have a bit of lingering vertigo, which is annoying. And I kind of consider. I think I might have long COVID. I'm not 100% sure, but anyways, it was so crazy that a respiratory illness caused vertigo. But the excuse me, one of the things we did at my birthday party, because I just had like a really small low key thing, is I put on The Pest, which is it's a movie from '97, and it's like John Leguizamo, his like, I don't know, his was supposed to be his like big solo role or something like that. And it was like it was 97, it was like 12 or 13 when it came out, and it's like all the jokes are so like, well, I think a fair bit about about the philosophy of comedy and what comedy is. It's kind of like a frequent pastime of mine. And there's things can be funny and be like there's like a lot of stuff can be funny but can be in terrible taste. Like that's the kind of view of like that. Taste and funniness are two separate things, right? And people like have edges, and the very interesting part to me is that we have all carry this darkness within us, right? And it's like very, it's very like, it's this part of us that people like, we don't want to really look into it because it's fucking horrific, right? Like, the world can be awful and terrible and like brutal and all these things, right? And part of what comedy does is that it takes our anxieties and like just helps us to relax. It's like a resolution of anxiety. But like sometimes, and I'm not like, this isn't saying that this is how it is with everybody, but it seems to me, from my observations, myself, other people, is that, the parts of us, like the things that we have a hard time laughing at are the things that kind of point us to, the parts of us where we're kind of not looking, or we don't really want to look. And I think part of the reason why comedians are generally, like so many comedians have fucked up experiences, like in terms of their mental health, and they're like it's a kind of like I've heard, like I used to listen to Joe Rogan and to all these other comedians that would talk about this element of it. And I think it's partly because, like, when you're into that situation, you're kind of having to look at this stuff within yourself a lot, and you might not like what's going on in there. But, like eventually you get to the point where you can kind of laugh at it. And so for me, like the Bawdy Bard has been like, for me, this like kind of like personal, to some degrees, it's personal triumph within my own life about like laughing at stuff and kind of, it's very much like I'm kind of like, I call it my flagship book, which is why I'm giving it away. Like it's kind of the one I'm advertising and stuff. And a lot of people found like, and like one of the things that I really appreciated about one of the reviews was that they said there were philosophical elements in there, but it wasn't preachy. It was intriguing or something like, it was something like that. It wasn't really pushing it. And some of the other books were pushing it. I mean, if you read, like I read a lot of like Paulo Coelho, and he was The Alchemist and like The Pilgrimage, and these books kind of like had a big impact on me writing my original books. And those books are kind of like, or like even like Hermann Hesse and stuff like that. They're preachy to a degree. Like they tell you what reality is to some degree. Now, excuse me. That's what some of my earlier books do. They probably like, they don't do it as gracefully as either of those people, I wouldn't say. I mean, I think they're masters at their craft of what they do, and I don't think that's all they did. Like I've read some more Coelho's work and Hesse, and like they're writing really good stuff. Like Hesse was a genius. Like I think Narcissus and Goldmund. I don't know if you ever. It's about like the plague, and like one guy is like a monk and the other guy just goes around having sex with every woman in the countryside, and it's like it's a very insane but awesome story, and like really interesting take on the human condition. And then there's like Siddhartha, which is like very much about like, it's about like the Buddha. Like it's supposed to be like this guy who sees the Buddha, but like the story is very, yeah, it's like a hero's journey type of thing, but it's about Eastern philosophy, but kind of like narrative form. But that review that I got about this book was that, because it's a hard thing to walk, because like you want to say something with your writing, like, and that's kind of with me, like it's a weird thing because I kind of like, I just want to write, and just whatever comes out, I want it to come out, and it comes out the way it does. But the Bawdy Bard is kind of like a bit more light and not so, because I was reading the Cutlass Swoon, and it's just like the guy's taking himself so seriously, the main character, and every character is partly you. Like I wouldn't say that he was me, just like the other characters are partly, but he was like kind of like, and when I was writing that, I wanted to make like the James Bond of like some kind of like super awesome character that like had like very little weaknesses and was kind of like this yeah, so it was kind of like that. But as I was reading it through it, like I got through the middle and I was just kind of like, oh my god. And it kind of, I feel like the end, like the ending and like how it goes through there is like it surprised me, because I was kind of like feeling depressed because I'd finished like, I don't know, 2/3 of the book, and I was like, what the like it's kind of like this, which is like, I don't know, artists always kind of don't like their own stuff, or at least that's kind of like something I've never, not that they don't like their stuff, but their stuff that they'll look at it and be like, oh Jesus, and other people be like, oh that's great or whatever, and it's like one of the better reviewed books I've got. And so like obviously me looking at it might not be exactly the way other people interpret it, but the Bawdy Bard was just like, like it was this thing, and I was gonna like just leave it there and like have this one book, and it was like a quick little jaunt. It's a novella, and it finishes up, and it's got an ending that's kind of like it doesn't need anymore. And like the guy finds his like long lost lover, and they get together. And like, if you haven't read it, sorry, spoilers, but it's been out for a while, and if you're listening to this podcast, you might want to get on that, but or not, whatever. So that's like kind of like the story is like he's kind of like ignoring his past and doesn't want to deal with it, because he was like I don't want to give the whole plot away, but like he kind of like had this woman that he was going to get married to, and then her father, who hates him, got him like put up on charges and got him sent away to a salt mine, and he kind of like comes out of it and like reinvents himself, and then just is like going through the countryside as this bard who's like kind of like just like this like like kind of like on top of the world, but meanwhile he's got this part of him that's eating away at him, and like circumstances force him to go back to his hometown. He meets her again, and they kind of reconnect, and so it was a fun little story. I really liked it, but and then I was like, okay, but I gotta keep going with this guy, because this is so fun. So I mean, like the second book, like what do you write what you've been through? Okay, I've been through a divorce, so immediately it's like boom, divorced, first chapter. This is on the back of the book, so I'm not giving anything away, but this is the Legend of the Silver Codpiece. And so then he's a free agent to go off and do whatever. And the first one, like there was like, it was a lot of magic and stuff in it, and it was like kind of the bard was like singing songs that were magical, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. But the second book, like it just goes fucking it just goes completely off the deep end with everything. And then like the fairies get into it, and there's like an enchanter, like a dead enchanter, and then cockatrice and all this stuff, and it's just kind of like it gets way sillier. And the Robin Hood is a big influence on this one, so that's kind of like the whole meat of that one is kind of like, it's just like another thing, but it's also like it's focused on the comedic element rather than the philosophical element. The philosophical element's there. I don't think I'll ever write a book that doesn't contain some philosophy, because I mean that was this. It's just the way I express myself. Like, that's kind of like my go-to. And I don't write books with, like, I don't plot anything out, and I don't like have anything. And like, as I'm living my life, like stuff comes in, I kind of like transmit those, my own personal experiences, in some form or another. Sometimes it's kind of obvious where it comes from. Some other times it ain't obvious at all to anyone but me. I think, maybe, who knows? But I think that this one I'm really happy with. Mark Richard, who's like a hilarious dude who wrote these books. He's written a bunch of books, but I've read the first Hellraiser, and I'm reading the second Hellraiser now, which is basically Hellraiser. So that reminds me. But anyways, he wrote a foreword to the book, a hilarious foreword. Couldn't have asked for a better one. But I'll just go through the books I've reviewed since our last little détente. No, détente isn't the word. Our last little tete-a-tete, head-to-head. Okay, so the first one is Tropical Punch by S.C. Jensen. It's like a cyberpunk noir, and it's pretty funny. Like, there's like a lot of like, it's not like super laugh out loud, but it's kind of like you get a little smile on your face, and there's like a lot of like references to like different like fashion and makeup, and I'm just kind of like reading this stuff, and it's like, Jesus, like, listen to my sisters, or when they're talking about whatever. Not that I have much experience of that anymore, but it's also like she's got this cool fucking cybernetic arm that like helps her smash shit up, and she's like, it's like a very, it's detective style, hard boiled. If you're, and like, I mean, she refers to Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. Is Raymond Chandler? Yeah, Raymond Chandler is the writer. Jeez, I always get those mixed up. Him and his main character, who I can't even remember now. Anyways, great book, recommended. Monster Burger by D.M. Gay, and that one it's like I already read the first book, so it's the second book in the 24/7 Demon Mart series, which is kind of it's ridiculous. It's so funny and it's so silly, and it's like, though, like, she's got her JPMs, as my sister says, her JPMs are high, jokes per minute. She's like, everything is, it's silly. It's like kind of like a take on Zombie, and like the main character is this guy who's just such a fucking misanthrope who somehow does well in spite of himself. Yeah, it's good. Really, really fun. Space Academy Dropouts by C.T. Phipps and Michael Sutkus. I don't know. That one's another funny one. Like, really, like, that one's more like the comedic elements are there, but it's also got a really tight plot. Like, I think C.T. Phipps has, not sure about Michael Sutkus. I didn't look too much into his history, but I think C.T. Phipps has written a lot, and he's got a pretty solid handle on story structure. And so that's kind of like, it's definitely there. So it's good, fun. I mean, it's a big Star Trek, like, it's like all sci-fi spoof. It was total sci-fi spoof, like references to everything and anything and everything, sci-fi. And I did bring up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy while I was reviewing it. All these reviews are at andrewmarkrowe.com/news, and there's like a little tag on these things, and you can just bring up the reviews and read through them, or you can go to my Goodreads page. I post them up on Reddit Fantasy if they are at all speculative fiction, which is mostly what I read. Anyways, those links are all in my emails and everything. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Now, this was like, I called it the Harvest Moon of literature. Harvest Moon is like this game where you play, you farm, and it's like, they say like low stakes or whatever. Like, it's not like a save the world type of story. It's not like, there's no killing. I think in some of the later games you can kill like monsters in a cave or something. But it's like, that's not the focus is on building a farm, and the focus is on building relationships with people around town, and all, you can get married and all this stuff, right? Like, it's like, I don't know, farming life simulator. And Legends and Lattes is kind of like that. It's like a former orc warrior chick who who she's great. Viv, I like their character a lot. She's like very I don't know, she kind of like, you get a bit of vulnerability from her, despite the fact she's kick ass and intimidates the shit out of people. And she's got a romance, and there's like friends who come into this shop, and like it's like, it felt like, you know, you're building up like friends and like a social community, and you're building up this thing and kind of like building on, and like there's like more baked goods they get, and yeah. The other two, I haven't written reviews for them but Aliens Wrecked Our Kegger by Drew Hayes, which is another Shingles book. I've read the first four now, I think. So the fourth Shingles book, and it's like the first three, like they're like, there's a lot of like the first one especially, I laughed out loud a lot, but this one is just like, I like think of different kinds of humor, and like one of my favorites is like when you're just like reading it and you're like, this is so fucking stupid, but it's like intelligent. Like the writing is really good. And like the whole premise is that like these aliens come down, and they're kind of like, you get into like to a frat house and like steal the keg, and then one of them confronts them, and then they have to have like a showdown with like drinking games, and you're just like kind of like like I was reading it, it's like, it's like really well written, like hats off to Drew Hayes, but just like, you kind of like reading it, and you're just like, this is so fucking stupid, and it's like like you kind of like, you know, you got this big grin on your face as you're reading it. Like that's the kind of humor. It's not like super, you know, raunchy. Like you know, it's good. I recommend it. And The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. This guy, like, I don't know, like some of like, I really like. Don't get me wrong. I start preface it, but I really like the book. But the characters are just like childish. Like there's so many characters who are so childish, and like I've posted reviews on Reddit talking about this, and people have gotten like their backs up about it and like been like, no, look, this is like realistic, and like, and you know, I like, there's a couple in particular, there's just like, this is like, they're stunted at like 12. Like I don't like, some of these people are like acting like my daughter would act. She's 4 years old, and I'm just mean in terms of like the lack of self-awareness for one, but also the pettiness. Like it's like, it's bizarre. Like everybody's petty. Nobody like they talk about nobility and all this shit, but the nobility is just keeping a lid on how fucking petty they are. Like that's to me how it feels. And like, I'm like, this is like, I don't know, you know, what Jordan was like in his life or whatever, but like, I'm like, this doesn't feel like me. Like it's great, and there's a lot of great world building, but and there's like a lot of emotional impact, I find, but I just don't know how much the guy, like his view on the human condition, I don't like some of the stuff. I guess I don't resonate with it entirely. It just feels a little bit juvenile. And you know, but at the same time, love the book. Like really, really loved it. I mean, that's a little rant I've got. Like I guess it just like, it kind of builds up like over time, and I just like, I can't believe what some of these people are doing. Like, and you know, it's like, it could be like, oh, maybe he just wanted plot devices, and so he has to have these people act not just irrational, because people act irrational all the time, but fucking stupid. Like some of these people are fucking stupid in what they do. Anyways, that's just a little bit of a rant. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. Sorry to leave you with that one. But I'm listening to the next book in the series. Like, this is the Wheel of Time, so I'm gonna finish the Wheel of Time. Like I said, the good way outweighs the bad. But like, I'm just like, it's painful reading about what these people are doing sometimes. Which, I don't know, we're all fucked, we're all crazy in one way or another. So anyways, that's it for this week. I'm a little bit over time. I try to keep it to a half hour, but like I said, Legend of the Silver Codpiece is coming out June 15th, so check it out. I think you'll like it, and yeah, and then my next guest is going to be DM Gay, who wrote Monster Burger and the first book, which is the Graveyard Shift. I've read both of those. First book in the 24/7 Demon Mart series. She's great, hilarious, and I'm super happy, super jazzed that she's coming on, that she's agreed to do it. So Okay, that's it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of May, and I'll be in touch soon.